I had barely hatched when our fleet had finally decided to attack their home planet. The fight in space didn't last too long at all. They lost quite quickly, at least in space. Our fleet just pushed away their meager defenses and kept going. They only lost a single ship, and that was due to one of their satellite reactors apparently going critical and exploding right next to one of our ships. The resulting burst was enough to cook through the hull, cause several compartments to depressurize, and then force the reactor to overload itself, this resulting in the ship being lost. The landing, we believed, would be simple enough. Simple as going down through their own satellite network, but that's only what we believed. As we descended across their entire planets, two of the continents were absolutely well defended. The locals seemed to have been preparing their primitive weapons for a long time. They were primitive, yet surprisingly effective. Many of the landing craft fell due to these ballistic weapons. Some were chemically propelled explosions. Others were explosives that were gravity assisted, as though they were dropped on. Others were self-igniting plasma when they struck, and the list just continued on what struck our ships. I'm grateful that I was still in the nest. It was customary to watch our victories as they happened, and as the family was watching over their holoscreen, I could hear them speaking. I walked out, and one of the first memories I had was hearing my mother scream. My elder siblings were on either side of her, cursing and crying at what they saw. My father was in sheer rage as I saw him crash his hands down on one side and his tail on the other. I asked, "What's going on?" My mother immediately turned and quickly grabbed me, picked me up to return me to the nest. As we went away, the last thing I saw on the image was something bursting into flame. I didn't know what was going on. I asked what it was, but she didn't want to answer. It was like she was too concerned with what was going on. I thought about this for a long time, but my young mind wouldn't exactly wrap around it. Eventually, I would watch the recordings. I knew they were there, and several solar cycles after the time that they rushed me back to the nest, I snuck in. I cried as I watched my cousin's ship burst into flames right there, and against my parents' words, I watched the other recordings as well. After seeing many of our ships fall and burn, sometimes doing both at the same time, or some of them burned and eventually exploded on the way down, turning them into balls of nothing. Yet, as I watched on the recordings, I could see that many of our ships made it down. At least 80% across the planet landed without any issue, and they were able to start setting up for planetary collection, enslavement, and colonization. This was standard practice. I had already been told about this in my education. Though usually what happened is the entire planet immediately would surrender to our might, or simply fall before our forces, not causing any casualties at all. This is why it was odd to see that a force that had fought so vehemently about us, that in small pockets these local bipeds came bearing gifts, many of them claiming that creatures such as ourselves were a good omen to them, and we sent the word that the native population was not all hostile, though this confused all the rest, as they were still being assaulted, many of them fighting for their lives. On 2 full continents and a few islands, resistance was extremely heavy. I could see in the files that the locals prefer ballistic weapons to our own energy-based weapons. It was clear that ballistic weapons in this atmosphere are far superior. Superior in range, as our own EM weapons only go 111 meters before their bolts are completely ineffective. Lethality was something we weren't expecting. Even though theirs were extremely lethal to us, especially in close range, we realized that it took at least 2 of ours inside their torso to actually be lethal. Only one seemed to make them very, very angry. What really amazed us was the accuracy of their ballistic weapons, as one must calculate the drop as gravity itself would eventually pull the projectile. Yet they had this certain creature out there. We couldn't tell if it was a biped or not. It was almost impossible to see if they had legs, tails, scales, or skin. It was strange. They called it a snipper. No, what is it? Ah, yes, sniper. These proved very dangerous, and it seemed as though the only restriction they had was ammo. Looking at this, I believed that eventually they would simply run out of their ballistic ammunition, and this would be an easy situation to fix, as they wouldn't be able to fight back. Oh, but we were wrong. Many times the bipeds were seen running out of their projectiles to send out of their strange weapons, and they would fall back to using primitive sharpened metal. After going through several of the files, to this day, I start to shudder, and I almost shed at the sound of what those humans yell right before they come at you with these sharpened spikes. Fix bayonets! Fix bayonets! Fix bayonets! The ferocity of their charge cannot be underestimated. I watched the images as they ran right into our lines, screaming and cursing the entire way. Some of them were struck and would end up flipping and falling and thrashing on the ground. I believed this would be enough to take them down, but no, it seemed after a few moments of them screeching in some strange language, they would simply get up and run at the lines even angrier than before. It was horrific. It was like dead men rising up and coming back at you. It was horrifying. And even though it was clear on the recording that even the Great Maker was telling those on the ground to leave, to abandon their post, that is not what we do. That is not what our people are trained to do ever. So they decided to stay and fight off the humans. Of course, they knew the humans couldn't get too close. We were wrong. As they got closer, I watched on the video and vomited from what I had seen. It shocked me. I didn't even blink as I saw the bipeds raise this supposedly empty projectile cannon to the nearest Columbra, and it was torn apart with one blast. It was like many projectiles came out at the same time. Even the armor designed to stop energy bolts didn't even seem to slow down this projectile. Getting in close on the recording, I could see the bipeds throw something. I was about to stop the recording and rewind to figure out what these strange orbs were. As my hand reached out to do this, the orbs exploded. The recording device was knocked over and covered with the entrails of one of our fallen. With that, I ran to the washroom and almost didn't make it as I vomited everything I had eaten in the past 3 days. When I got back, I saw that the recordings had not stopped. I forgot to pause it. Yet, a new recording was playing. It was in a dense, very, very dense type of woodland. The warrior caste were skinning bipeds. This I would find gross, but wait a moment. That isn't skinning. They talk about how easy it was and how it's been taking down the bipeds. I was confused. This must be from another area around the planet. It was easy to take them down? I had to double check to make sure this was actual archive footage and not just some sort of joke. It was clearly not something set up to be humorous. I was still amazed. They're removing the outer coverings. I realized that these humans wear textiles amongst them. Those stripping them down reveled in the size and texture of the dead creatures. They would laugh how they killed each one, hunting them down through the trees, using their slender bodies to move in between the trees as the bipeds clumsily went through each one. Eventually, they killed them by pouncing on them, poisoning them, shooting them, cutting them until they bled out, or grabbing them and constricting as tight as possible, taking a lot of pleasure in hearing the sounds of their endoskeleton slowly cracking underneath. That is when I saw what they were really doing. One of them dislocated his jaw. and the first one began to swallow this now naked creature. As it slid down its throat, it seemed to wince ever so slightly about halfway down, but seemed to enjoy the rest of the flavor. When it was done, he rehinged his jaw and looked absolutely satisfied at what he just ingested. The others were following suit, though most chose to wash the body first. As I watched all this happen, I saw a few fight over one of the bodies. I was too young to understand, but I ended up learning fast. The warriors believe that they inherit the traits of the fallen foes, all the positive traits, that is, their speed, their strength, and everything else. They also believe that consuming other male parts will increase their ability to pleasure their mates. At the time, I was far too young to understand what they were talking about. I do now. As they argued over the pale biped's body, flapping it around due to the lack of muscular resistance as the body was simply being pulled at from both sides. Then the one on the right side of the image I was watching opened his mouth as far as possible, reached forward very quickly, and bit off the reproductive pieces of this bipod and swallowed them quickly. He looked with his blood dripping down his jowls and seemed to gloat at his victory to the other. This resulted in a fight that knocked over the recording device, ending the recording. I was about to play more, but I could hear my patriarchal parents stirring. I'd have to watch this later. They must have figured something was amiss. The files, when I went to check again, were blocked. I couldn't view for several more solar rotations. In that time, I'm sure everyone thought I lost interest, as we were in conflict with so many others, yet none seemed to intrigue me more than the bipeds. By the time my best friend and I were able to break into the records again, we were just about reaching our pubescent years. We had a much better understanding of war at that point. We even found out the name of this species. They call themselves human. Is it human? Is it human? Human? I'm going to have to check the records again. These humans still hold 1.5 continents on their world. The war, if you call it that at this point, is still ongoing. Mostly, our forces hold areas of the planet they decide to strip mine for what they need. Along with that, harvesting stations have been set up around each of the planets. Each one is a treasure of materials so bountiful, even their asteroid belt, yet it's easier to tear apart a planet than to run around on an asteroid field. The humans, for everything that's happened, seem to have accepted their fate. They hold territory on this dying world. At least, that's what they say. Breaking into the archives, we see the truth. Humans are being herded into areas for uses. They're used as forced labor until they stop being useful, either by exhaustion or by defiance. Didn't matter. Those that are not useful are to be, well, the next meal. Sometimes, many times, still alive, still screaming, still yelling. It is something to see. No other species has ever been so defiant as to fight until they are completely down in the maw, and even then, every once in a while, you'll see one thrashing and scratching on the inside, forcing those that swallow it to vomit it back up, only to beat it to death and swallow it again. As we continued through the archives, we could see that certain human females are being used for more deplorable ways. There is now a very intricate underground market for video of such acts, as well as the selling of slaves for this purpose. With even just a cursory evaluation as we looked into it, we always found the traders in such things would always say something strange we didn't understand for a while. Get 'em while they're small. We did not understand this particular phrase until a very interesting video came across our search. One of the largest males of our Grand Expeditionary Forces had brought a human female in, fully developed human female to his chamber. She was absolutely horrified as he ripped off her outer protective gear, and the prospect of what he was going to do scared her so much as she seemed to sweat in fear, begging for him not to do this. He strapped her arms to the area so that he could do what he wanted to, and before he even pulled off his few outer coverings, he simply remarked to her that she should be grateful that she has multiple orifices, as unlike humans, he has multiple as well. We didn't understand this. Wait, is their physiology really that different? As he forced himself down, she began to make a noise. We didn't understand this noise. Isn't this what they're supposed to sound like? But we knew by the title of the video this was wrong. Something was off. Even after he finished, it seemed as though she made this same noise, this same sound, even more and more and more, and it seemed to get louder and louder to the point where she was actually in pain making this noise. We found out that this was actually laughter. The one that had done such a thing to her looked at her confused and waited till she could finally speak as he asked her, why, what are you doing? The translation was completely off, but there were some points that came through just fine. She explained that the sound that was coming through was not that of erotic pleasure, or was it any type of pain. She was laughing so much that she was unable to stand. The male thought that since he is not able to stand, he must have done something very good or very bad. Then the insults from the female started. The one insult that seemed to push the warrior over the edge was when, "That was supposed to hurt? I couldn't feel anything. You're hung like a fucking field mouse." When the warrior checked his device, as he had no idea what the hell a field mouse was, he raged and then began to hit her so hard that he ripped her jaw off. Then, wrapping his tail around her, he constricted her until all the bones broke, and what was left was barely a husk of goo. My best friend ran outside and vomited at this video, not believing why someone would even take video of such a thing. It was then that we realized why human flesh was so important to the warrior caste, and of course, we looked at each other and giggled a lot at the prospect. Perhaps we could have a warrior who does get the extras from the human. Though this made me want to see an unaltered human. Maybe an unaltered human male? Eventually, I did see a human. However, the areas I was most interested in seeing had been bitten off. I wondered if the humans had anything like this ever happened through history, as this was happening to those in servitude as well. Many times this part of them was removed. Just a few more solar cycles later, and I was about one solar cycle away from my bonding. Thankfully, he was a warrior that had survived Earth. I thought this was wonderful. He had experienced so much, but when I met him, he didn't speak. He didn't look anyone in the eyes. He simply stood there, quiet, polite whenever you talked to him, but just didn't say anything. Since I couldn't get any answers, I ended up looking up one of his battles. Wait a minute. There is only one battle he was in? This was interesting. I pulled up everything from the archives, and I could see what happened. The humans had brought all kinds of explosives as they headed towards the line. Some made giant craters, others just made it hard to see. Some made it near impossible to breathe or even keep your eyes open. But the worst would be the one that set everything ablaze. In the recording, the screams. Oh, great maker, the screams. I had to reach out and mute the video. I couldn't take it. The humans came forward through all this with their metal monstrosities. They would stay well out of range as small devices flew through the air. These small devices, seemingly some sort of smart device, would find their way into some of the smallest crevices, whether it be a window, whether it be some sort of building, a vehicle. some of the small temporary dens that we dug into the ground, they would simply fly into, and then they would explode, destroying everyone and everything around them. Under all this cover and through all these explosions, the humans ran in. The sound those humans made with the handheld cannons will still give me shivers every single time I hear it, coupled with the tossing of the death orbs. Every time they saw them, our own people would curse and try to slither away as fast as possible. The sound of all this was almost enough to drown out the humans coming in, screaming and jumping at each of them, using the spikes at the end of their weapons as they were cursing, laughing, cursing more, and killing our people. Our people were not stopping. They would fire back. They would lash at them. They would swing at them with their arms, but nothing could seem to stop the humans as they were in blind rage. Our forces tried to regroup behind the line to push them out, but they didn't make it. At least, not many of them. Our chieftain decided that an orbital strike was the best course of action. My future mate was one of 4 that survived the bombardment from the freighter. That didn't stop the humans, though. They lifted themselves out of the dirt and just kept going. My future mate was the only one to be able to successfully withdraw as the humans came through, given the fact that our own forces fired on them, combined with the fact that he was the only one to bring back any intel from the attack. He was not treated as a coward, but instead honored as a hero. I pondered all this for a long time, and yet I still decided I wanted a certain gift, my gift before my bonding, which is traditional. I asked to go to the humans' homeworld. Though my parents were adamant that I do not go, that I choose something else, I insisted, and being that it's my bonding gift, they really couldn't refuse. Tradition and all, we know. Landing on the surface, it felt nice. A decent temperature, clean air, plenty of flora and fauna around. My father and brother escorted me. My future mate did not wish to join us. He did not want to come back to this rock ever. I was shown the landing zones, which were built up quite nicely, the harvesting areas, which were very deep holes into the mantle of the planet. They were pulling up different materials, and it seemed how efficient they were at breaking these down. I did have to ask how long it took to get this far, and they were saying, pretty far. This is pretty tough dirt. It seems as though they do not have the soft soil of our own home planet, but instead theirs is full of a lot of rocks. Some of the extremely diverse flora and fauna around us was something I will never forget. I was shown some of the most dangerous creatures they found as well. To my surprise, some of them look a lot like us. The humans call them snakes. Though there are other reptiles, these are the ones closest to us, at least on the bottom part of our bodies. We do look a lot like humans from the, what do they say it? The waist up? Whenever I said that, they all look and say, your human is getting better. As I ask more about these dangerous creatures, they say how some of them in the cages carry enough poison in their glands to take down an entire division of our own best warriors. I tried communicating with it, but it was a loss. It is a primitive thing, after all. With everything they showed us, mostly all in safe zones, there was one place on this planet I wanted to see. And since I only had one final planetary cycle before I had to go back and get ready for my bonding, I wanted to see this place. I wanted to see what the humans call an ocean. We do not have these. I've never seen one, and I never will if I don't get this chance. When we arrived, I noticed the smell in the air. It was strong, but that was not anything compared to what I saw about the vastness of the water. It was astounding. Along with the sounds that came out, it just took my breath away and made me feel a chill from my head to my tip with my tail. Since, of course, we are not aquatic and we can barely swim 100 meters before being completely out of energy and end up drowning, we don't get close to large bodies of water. We just simply leave them be. I slowly summoned up the courage to touch the foamy, what do they call them? Waves? It was surprisingly delightful. I even let my scales dip into the water just a little bit, though my father and my brother were very petrified of this. As they worried that I would drown, I motioned that it's very, very shallow, and it shouldn't be a problem. They simply told me to not get too deep. This is a moment I will cherish forever, as I was able to flip my tail and splash the water around. It was entertaining. Unfortunately, I found out I might not have long to enjoy this. I came out and I wanted to get a picture, an image, a video, something to look across the vast ocean. As I was looking across the horizon and enjoying it with father and brother, we looked out on the horizon and we saw the great haze. You see, in our biology, we cannot see great distances. After a while, everything just goes into a strange mist. It's just the way we are. The great mist that we see, there was a shape. A ship? Father told me to enjoy the chance. Something I learned in this moment is humans can not only swim very well, they have vessels that can traverse these vast oceans with ease, so much so that they can fight entire massive weather events. I was so excited that my tail was wagging. Father told me that it was a very rare sight to see one so close to the boundary. Perhaps it was a good omen for my upcoming bonding. I caught my brother wagging his tail as well as we watched it out in the ocean. Father said, "It will go by soon, over the horizon, as they never come straight towards them. If they come within visual range, they're very, very close." So, to get a good long look, I pulled out my recording device so I could actually get a better look, something to assist me, and I almost pinched myself for realizing it a little too late that I even had such a recording device. I zoomed in, and I watched the water get pushed on either side of this strange vessel. As I tried to get a good look, my brother looked over my shoulder, and this unfortunately made me zoom in far faster than I wanted. Resetting on the ship, we both stared in awe at what my device was picking up. That is when I noticed something strange on the very edge of the video. What is that? It looks like more waves, but they're sideways, I thought to myself. I pulled back the zoom and I could see that this vessel was not alone. In fact, it was very far from alone. Dozens of other ships were with it, flanking it from either side, all with it massive cannons facing forward. What the hell? Before any of us had a chance to even process what we were seeing, something else caught my eye. Something to my left just jumped out of the water. Then some sort of chemical explosion burst behind it and sent it higher and drifting its way right towards the spaceport. Several more came up farther on my left, and three more on my right, and then one came up right in front of us. I was still holding my recording device straight forward. I didn't know what to do. I was in such shock. I looked at my father and brother. Brother was just as shocked as me, and father suddenly started cursing. Looking back at the vessels, I could see the cannons raise, and then there was a burst, kind of a pop at this distance, of chemical fire that we could see come out of them. The other vessels fired other chemically propelled explosions as they went straight up and then arced over our heads. I pulled the zoom back all the way, and I noticed something. There's something in the clouds coming. What is that? As I looked up at the missiles. I zoomed in a little closer, and I could see small metal in-atmosphere fighters that simply filled these skies. Behind them were even larger ones. What the hell was that? Some of the larger ones seemed to be dropping cargo? What are they dropping out? It was strange, but as soon as they dropped it, several out of each one, they seemed to simply turn away. I moved my camera over to the cargo, which seemed to be using air to slow itself down onto some sort of synthetic. That was odd. Then something came out of the cargo. Wait, did the cargo just drop cargo? I watched many of them drop, and then suddenly they turned and took off right towards the spaceport. This, what's going on? They turned and they seemed to just fly away. I turned to Father. I didn't even hear him at this point, but I could hear him now yelling at us to follow him. We followed as fast as our scales could take us, and I yell, "What's going on?" Father yells, "It's the humans, and they look pissed."